In-laws made me sign a prenup because they thought I was poor. Now that I'm worth 5x more than them, they wanted to solve it and are trying to force my wife to divorce me. 8 years ago, my wife and I got married, but before that, my in-laws decided to make me sign a prenup, and I found it a bit insulting at the time because they had made it quite clear to me that I was not really welcome in their family, so making me sign the prenup just felt like even more of a slap in the face. I had been working in sales when I met my wife, but after having been with her for 1 year, I decided to quit my job and start my own electronics brand. We were both 27 at the time, and by the time I finally got around to officially starting my business, I was almost 28. But my wife had been supportive of me throughout the process, and she was the happiest when I finally got to start working on my dream business. Her parents, however, were not that happy because they thought that I was living off of her money, which was true to a certain extent. She was definitely supporting me because I didn't have a steady income, but it's not like I was completely relying on her. Anyway, at 29, I decided to propose to her and we got married within a year. But a couple of months before our wedding, her parents came to me and told me that I needed to sign up for a prenup that stated that, in the case of a divorce, all our assets and money would be kept separate, and I could not stake a claim to anything that was hers, and vice versa. In the case of a divorce, I would also have to repay my wife and my in-laws for having supported me while I was working on my business, since they had occasionally sent money to my wife to help us out while we were living together. And it was a reminder that I was indebted to them, which I thought was kind of unnecessary at that point of time. And I'm pretty sure that they included the second part of the clause, that even my wife would not be able to stake a claim to anything that was mine, so it would all be fair. The agreement even stated that if we decided to have a joint account, the money from that would also be divided on the basis of who had contributed more, because my in-laws had just assumed that throughout our marriage, my wife would be supporting me. When they had approached me with it, they had told me that signing off on it would be the only way for them to feel safe about accepting me as their son-in-law. It was quite insulting for several reasons. Firstly, because they had just assumed that I would always rely on my wife and would never be able to make something of myself, which was an unfair assumption in itself because I was already working quite hard at the time to get my business going so that I wouldn't be a burden on my wife or anybody else. Secondly, even before I quit my job to start my own business, they had never liked me. They had a problem with me right from the beginning, from the first time that my wife had brought me to her house to introduce me to her parents, because they did not think that I was good enough to be dating their daughter. And by good, I actually just mean rich. For context, my in-laws have a real estate firm and have been doing quite well ever since they started. They come from financially well-off backgrounds themselves, so all of them have grown up comfortably. My parents had normal jobs, though. My dad was a high school football coach and my mom was the manager at a nearby coffee shop. So I didn't exactly have to struggle with money growing up, but I definitely did not have the kind of money that my in-laws did, and right from the beginning, they used to look down on me. It was the usual, snarky remarks, mean comments disguised as jokes and stuff, and just an insufferable and weird attitude around me in general. I never said a word about it, even though my wife got quite worked up about their behavior because I did not want them to know that they had managed to get under my skin. I believed that the best way to deal with them was by not paying any heed to them, because I knew that my wife loved me, and I loved her, and that was good enough for both of us. I did not need them to approve of us, so even when they approached me with the prenup, I felt a bit insulted, but I signed it. And when they took it to my wife, she was quite offended, but I had discussed it with her beforehand, and she signed it as well without any complaint. Both of us knew exactly what they were trying to accomplish. They were just trying to play my games with me and insult me right before the wedding so that I would maybe back off or something, and they would be able to accomplish what they had set out to do right from the beginning, sideline me, and somehow get their daughter to be with somebody more appropriate by their standards. Unfortunately for them, they haven't been able to do that so far, and they won't be able to do that ever, because my wife and I are always going to be on one team. That was several years ago, and since then, I have made a lot of progress in my career. My business grew and I kept working at it, and in the last 2 years, it took off exponentially and started doing better than it ever had all of a sudden. I guess the social media marketing and all the hard work that I had put into my company had started to finally pay off. Whatever it was, something had worked in our favor greatly, and as of now, I'm worth almost 5 times more than what my in-laws are. So now, of course, they wanted to solve the prenup all of a sudden. They came to visit us a couple of days back, and we were all having dinner together. But after dinner, once our son was in bed, they got us both to sit down together and told us that they had been giving a lot of thought, and now, they finally thought that it was time to speak to their lawyers and have the prenup dissolved. My wife looked surprised, and even I was pretty taken aback for an instant, but then, I decided to decline. I told them to their faces that I did not think that it was necessary, since they themselves had claimed that the prenup was the only way they would feel safe with accepting me as their son-in-law, and I did not want them to lose the safety net. I was obviously being sarcastic and I guess they picked up on that, even though I tried to sound as sincere as I possibly could. They told me that several years had passed since then, and we had a son together now, so they no longer had any reason to have any doubts about me, but I still declined, and I told them that I was not open to discussing this anymore. When I said that, they started to get agitated and told me that it was their idea to have the prenup in the first place, so now I should respect whatever they say and have it dissolved since they don't think it's necessary anymore, and because they are older and more experienced, they think that we should take their advice to avoid any bitterness in the future. Honestly, I had no idea what they were even talking about, but after some bickering, I told them that I had no interest in talking about the prenup anymore, and since my wife and I had no plans of getting divorced anytime soon, they should drop it as well. But they simply refused to let it go until it turned into a fight and all the drama that we had been sweeping under the rug for so many years started coming out. I finally brought up how they had only just signed the prenup and brought it to me because they wanted to humiliate me and remind me that I was not in the same tax bracket as them, and now that I had surpassed them, they suddenly wanted to pretend as none of that had ever happened. And their point was that they only wanted their daughter's future to be secure because in case I turned out to be a gold-digging husband who was going to leech off of her for as long as we were married, they wanted her to at least have a safety net in the form of that prenup, and they were just looking out for their daughter. So that went on for a while, and after some time, I was too tired to keep arguing with them anymore, so I decided to tell them that I was done, and I wanted them to leave. I thought I was being perfectly reasonable by asking them to leave because we were getting too loud and my son was asleep, so I did not want to wake him up. Besides, it was quite late at night at the time, so I just wanted him to go away and then I would be able to get some sleep and take my mind off this. However, they took offense at that, and they told me that the only reason I had even been able to get to the place that I am today was because of the support that their daughter and they had given me. And there, I would beg to differ because they had never supported me, they had only ever supported their daughter. I know that in the beginning, I had mentioned that they would occasionally send money to us while I was still working on my business, and I'm really grateful to them for that, but that was not for me. That was for their daughter, and we could have easily survived without their help as well because I did have some savings of my own. The only times that they would send money was when my wife would ask them for it, and that money was specifically for her own purpose because sometimes she would run short after all the household expenses for us. I had offered to dip into my savings several times, but she told me not to because her parents had the money and she knew it, and as long as they were sending it to her, they would not have an issue with it. So technically, they did support us, but they only did it for the sake of their daughter. They never had any faith in me. And as for supporting me emotionally, let's not even go there. They had never made me feel like a part of the family, and they had no right to tell me that I wouldn't have gotten to the place that I am in today without their support. I think I could have easily done it and they had no role to play in it, so they had no right to be throwing it in my face like that. When I said that to them, at which they started yelling at me even louder, and the fight just got worse because they thought that I was being ungrateful by telling them that they did not have anything to do with my success. After one point, they turned to my wife, and they told her that she needed to make a choice now because they had tried to support our relationship for as long as they could, but this was getting out of hand since I refused to acknowledge their contributions at all. Somehow, my wife managed to convince them to leave, and since then, we haven't spoken. She has stayed in touch with her parents and has been trying to get them to apologize, even though I've told her that I don't really need to apologize. I just want to stay away from me. They can visit her freely and even have the same kind of relationship with their son, but all I want from them is to give me space because I really don't feel like I'm interested in repairing my relationship with them right now. Especially after everything that went down the other day, since the fight had been a long time coming, and honestly, I'm surprised that we were able to avoid the kind of an emotional confrontation for so many years. But anyway, now it's done and dusted and I just want to stay away from them. However, I recently learned from my wife that while she was trying to convince them to apologize to me for all the things that they said and for treating me badly all these years, they were trying to brainwash her into divorcing me. Last evening, she came to me with her phone and showed me a bunch of messages. She seemed pretty upset because she had been trying really hard to get things back to normal because my son really loves his grandparents and she just didn't want things to get weird with the family, and neither did I, to be honest. But after reading those messages, I'm not so sure anymore because they were refusing to acknowledge the fact that they had ever treated me badly and were acting as if they had every right to have treated me the way that they did, even if it was humiliating for me. And not only were they defending their own behavior, they were also accusing me of being ungrateful for support, which, again, I don't think there was any, and they think that that's the reason why my wife should start rethinking her marriage to me and consider a divorce right now before it gets too late, because I purely don't love her enough to respect her family, and since I don't want to dissolve the prenup, I'm also obviously suspicious of her now that I have some money of my own. It's all rubbish that they are trying to feed to her so that she gets brainwashed into divorcing me.